Welcome to the Gen Gap, where time-tested leadership meets the demands of a new generation. I'm Maureen Fitzgerald, your host, bringing candid conversations with industry heavyweights. Together, we unpack how they are rethinking talent, culture, and leadership in the face of generational transition, AI disruption, and the rise of personal brand dominance. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies the intersection of strategic thinking, operational excellence, and human-centered leadership. Christen Dali is Chief Operating Officer for the Equities and Research Departments at Peel Hunt, a specialist investment bank in London, where she's focused on scaling new products, building resilient operating models, and driving data-led efficiency across global teams. Christen is a seasoned finance and operations leader with experience spanning corporate banking, fintech innovation, and equities trading. She has led transformative initiatives from international expansion to launching new revenue streams, and she's known for turning complex business challenges into practical strategic solutions that deliver real impact. Christen is also a school governor in London, a newly qualified yoga teacher, and a passionate advocate for making finance more accessible, inclusive, and sustainable. Please join me in welcoming Christen Dali. Christen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm so excited about our conversation. Let's jump in. I'd love to get a sense of if you could give yourself one piece of advice at the start of your career, what would it be?
When you're young and inexperienced, I think it's easy to see accomplished professionals and bankers as being in a completely different league, and people you can't dare to talk to. And I think the best piece of advice that I did receive, and I wish I had received it a little bit earlier, is that despite any hierarchies, at the end of the day, you're an adult in the room talking to another adult. And as long as you engage professionally and respectfully, you're essentially on the same level. And I think that reframe is something that has served me quite well over the years.
Do you find now in your career that ideas could come from anywhere? And so some of the new ideas coming from the younger generation is really impactful?
Absolutely. And again, it's in the way they are brought forward. If I have a young person come to me and say, hey, I have this idea, it may have been considered in the past, I'm not sure, there may have been considerations that I haven't thought about, that's worth hearing. Sometimes you have people slightly more bold than that, which might need to kind of be tempered out because experience is still valuable. But absolutely, I think the beauty of financial services these days is that you do have people from all walks of life, whether it's age, gender, prior experience. Careers are no longer linear. And I think that really makes for better ideas and diversity of thoughts.
How has your perspective on leadership evolved throughout your career?
When I started work, I wanted to earn money, be rich. It was easy to be motivated. I was always learning. It was exciting to work on deals. But then the novelty sort of wears off and you pay more attention to what the leaders are actually saying. And I feel like the tone has shifted over time from profitability to purpose. Why do people turn up to work? And I do think that's something younger people want out of their work. They want a bit more meaning in their work and not just the paycheck. And another thing I'm thinking about is the fact that in financial services, there's been a mixed picture in terms of adoption of remote practices. When I interview young people these days, they value flexibility and balance. And leadership is also learning to lead differently in a world where, work-life integration is the word of the day. And for some, it's even a non-negotiable.
So what are some of the things that you're doing to help with that engagement when you think about the next generation?
I think it means that what I try to do is build trust as soon as possible. I think I used to think that trust is something you build over time. when actually I've learned that, particularly with newer generation, the clocks sort of starts ticking the moment you meet them. Um, they want to see quite quickly if you're someone they can trust, someone who will follow through, who will listen, who leads with integrity. So I've sort of shifted my approach to focus on maybe small, visible wins, increased communication, actually mostly in writing, and on sort of showing, not just telling, that I can be trusted.
Mhm. So you are running a global team. Can you talk a little bit about sort of building that trust given the different cultures that are brought to your team?
Yeah. So,
I know
I
we
mean,
talked about the Copenhagen example and sort of how, depending on where you're sitting, that perspective could be taken the wrong way.
yes. So, it's funny, the UK was part of Europe not long ago. We opened an office in Europe, in Denmark, and you would think that culturally, things are not very different, when actually, um, sometimes it's worth making the effort to understand local norms. In Denmark, in particular, sharing more of the context behind decisions is really important, and not just the what, but the why. And I found that because it turns out that in Denmark, the way people show up at work is that everyone, regardless of their level, expects to be heard and to be entitled to voicing their opinion, being just as valid, which is a great way to do it, just as valid as a junior, as well as the CEO. So it's taking that open door office mentality even further. Um, and so, particularly in Copenhagen, transparency and understanding people's motivations was really key. Um, we also have a team in New York, and we see them. I probably see them about once a year, and um, obviously, face-to-face communication is the best way to to build trust with people. But actually, something I found recently is also owning to mistakes publicly, is helpful for that. So I actually messed up some financial numbers reporting recently. Um, was asked correctly by our team to have a look at it again, and I think showing vulnerability by admitting that I was wrong, and how I then corrected it, I think helped create an element of psychological safety, which is also important for building trust with global teams.
Right. You're setting an example that it's okay to make a mistake as long as you're kind of trying to fix it and move on.
Yeah, and I think data and data integrity is arguably also a trust currency. We're in a regulated environment. Processes and reporting are important, and when you're not at the headquarters, being confident in the information you receive or you're working with is key. So yeah, that's also part of it.
Maybe it would be helpful to actually take a step back and have you talk about your team and your role and kind of what you're doing day to day.
Sure. I'm currently the CEO of the Equities and Research Department at Pure Hunt. We're a specialist investment bank based in London, with offices in New York and in Copenhagen, in Denmark. And I work on everything from scaling sort of new products, and in particular data products is an offering we're currently shaping. I look quite closely at our cost base and trying to optimize that, but also making sure the day-to-day runs smoothly for our clients and also for our teams. So that might involve liaising with risk, compliance, internal audit to make sure we're operating in the right sort of risk environment too.
And can you talk a little bit about your career journey, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a generalist. So my career so far has been a mix of front office and back office roles, in banking, finance, operations, and strategy. I started my career in corporate banking, where I also studied to be a chartered accountant. And over the years, I've moved through several roles in corporate banking, in sort of venture building, and then in equities more recently. I like change. I like new challenges. I like drawing on lots of experience to kind of do something new. I'm originally from Belgium. You might pick up a little French accent in my voice. I'm now happily based in London, having spent a year and a half in Copenhagen to set up our office there.
And how are you thinking as you look across your team? How are you sort of thinking about culture and how that drives growth? And what are you thinking about as far as actively shaping the culture of your team?
I think what's important is really creating that understanding, and I would say even also empathy between regions, and avoiding a sort of head office versus local market mentality or divide. So it's not just about agreeing on everything necessarily, but understanding why some decisions might look different from one market to another, and respecting that context. So I think I really try and embed that thinking, and encourage others to embed that thinking of cross-border empathy, if you want, in everything we're doing and decisions we're making. I also think culture really helps shape innovation, but innovation in a regulated environment means within boundaries, with discipline, and within our risk appetite. So in growth phases, you can see kind of people pushing the envelope and moving fast. But I would say it's about moving fast with your eyes open, to make sure that growth is sustainable and not exposing the firm to too much risk.
So you talked about the importance of kind of connecting the offices, connecting the team. Can you talk about some of the things that you've implemented to improve communication across the team? I know we spoke about some of the things that you're doing to share information.
Yeah, I think it's two main things. One is, I guess, taken from the technology world, the technology industry, and simply leveraging communication channels, asynchronous communication channels like Teams or Slack. And what we've done is created sector-specific Teams channels. So what it looks like is that for a particular sector, like retail and leisure, for example, you find the research analysts or the salespeople across geographies, but also the investment bankers. And whilst we have people on both sides of the wall in that group, back to trust, individuals do know what they can or can't share within those channels. But it's really effective and really quick and really useful. It means that when an analyst comes out of a results presentation for a company's half-year results, they can immediately, drop a few notes or their thoughts on a Slack channel, which straight away can be relayed to the salespeople and potentially to their clients when they're having conversations. So it's that kind of sped up communication that doesn't matter, that doesn't put any emphasis on where you are in the world, which can really help. And I think the other thing as a leader is more around internal narratives and storytelling. Really, people won't necessarily remember the slide you last showed at the last all staff meeting, but they will remember the story about how we won a brokership, which took us 18 months of concerted effort. I think that's also the sort of things that keep culture alive.
So how do you celebrate those wins? Do you have a sort of a set communication cadence of announcing wins, or is it as it comes?
Yes, within my teams, I have a Friday email. It's not every Friday, but it's again to be as authentic as possible. It's when there's something meaningful I want to tell the team about, either this a story about what happened or something that happened elsewhere in the bank that we could leverage in some shape or form, or that could simply inspire people to sort of come to work and feel proud to be part of the firm too.
Great. I mean, you definitely hear from the younger generation that feeling like they have a purpose and are a part of something bigger than themselves is important. How are you thinking about career progression for your younger employees? Because that's also very important.
Yeah, I think given careers can look very differently from one to another. I mean, I remember starting on my graduate scheme, and people who were with me at the time are in completely different places to me now. I think instead it's important to focus on giving them tools and the confidence to shape that path of their own. And I'm a big believer in mentorship being absolutely key. I think pairing early career employees with more experienced colleagues is invaluable, both in terms of sort of hard, more technical skills, as well as the softer skills, the having a sounding board for ideas or ways to approach particular problems. Certainly has served me really well throughout my career.
Do you have a formal mentorship program, or does it get done more organically?
Actually, we do. We have a membership program that is kicked off by our people team every year, I think for the last 2 years, where anyone can choose to come forward either as a mentor or as a mentee or both. Yeah. And there's some formal training to go through, which is interesting. It's not just you're left in the wild to do whatever you want. I think it's well done in that there's very clear expectations that are set from the beginning.
Can you share some of those, or what the formal training part of it is?
Sure. So the training, our people team insists that the training needs to be face to face, and I think a big aspect of the mentor training, for example, is there's a big emphasis, as you can imagine, on confidentiality, but also on the fact that you're there, I suppose, more as a coach. You're there to trigger thoughts and not necessarily to provide answers. Employees are matched depending on what they're looking for in a mentor-mentee relationship, but actually we're still very different people with very different backgrounds. So it's more about triggering those thoughts rather than giving the answers as one perceives them to be. On the mentee relationship side of things, which is the one I was on last year, it's actually more about this is driven by you. You're in charge of your career. You're the person who should set how frequently we meet, what format things look like, whether they are regular agenda items or just ad hoc agenda items. And I think setting those expectations from the get-go very clearly and very formally, even though they might seem like common sense, I think make those relationships last for very long, rather than I've seen some mentorship schemes before sort of break down a few months in because just things lose momentum. Whereas when they're clearly defined, I think people are more likely to stick to them and therefore see the benefits.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a coach, with any coaching engagement, you want to set goals so that you know that you're making progress rather than just, building relationships are great, but, you want to be working towards some goals. So that's great. So this leads me to my final question. What legacy do you want to leave as a leader in this industry?
Right. So I think hopefully I've contributed to building a culture of collaboration across regions, but also across disciplines, having worked both in front and back office, across time zones. And because silos don't just exist in big organizations; they exist in small ones too. But solving problems together is what this is all about. I think the other thing I've tried to do is normalize cross-sector thinking. So I mentioned earlier that we use technology, and I think that's probably some of the best innovations we've seen in finance have come from looking outside our own industry, tech, but also manufacturing practices or governance lessons from the nonprofit sector. I think that cross-pollination keeps us relevant, modern, and resilient. And I think also I hope to be able to contribute beyond the firm. So I think as leaders, we should contribute not just to our bottom line, but also to the world, whether it's supporting diversity in leadership or improving the wider community. I think we don't just deliver commercially. We also, I think, should use our platform to make the world a better place too.
Thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
No worries. Thank you for having me.